What's up, YouTubers and plant lovers? It's Justin, and today I wanted to show you my Phalaenopsis collection. Now, before I begin, I wanted to take some time to talk about something tragic that happened to me, and a reason why I haven't been able to get up a video in the last couple of weeks. We did have a tragedy in the family. I know a lot of you know my cat, Salem. He passed away. It was very sudden. It came out of nowhere. It was very unexpected, and to have someone so healthy and so young go out so quickly, it really kind of messed with me. And I've experienced a lot with death in my life, and when you expect it, it's not as hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, a death at any time is completely hard to bear, and it does not get easier no matter how many times you experience it. But when it's close to the family and it's someone you see every day and you play with, when it happened here in the house. So to see that area and to know what happened and to experience it every day when I come home, it's hard. It really is. So I wanted to tell you all, we did have him cremated and we were able to keep his remains. So that has helped us a lot. But we do have a lot of his stuff even still. And I wanted to point out that I do have Leafeon sporting his little collar that Salem always wore. But one silver lining that did happen out of that is I had two outdoor cats. And since Salem passed away, one of the cats did come inside. So if you do see a cat in my video, it's not a ghost. I don't know if you can see him, but he's laying right here passed out. That's Buddha. And we've given him his name. He was a stray that just showed up a couple years ago and was looking for food. And he is a fat cat, hence the name Buddha. But one thing that I've learned from the death of Salem is that unfortunately in America, a lot of people do not adopt black cats. I know there's a stigma out there that says that black cats are unlucky. That's really sad because Salem was a kindred spirit and he was always so happy, and there was not 1 ounce of bad luck in that cat. And I've heard that they are a relatively healthy species because there's not a whole lot of crossbreeding and a whole lot in the way of genetics with the black cats. So typically they are pretty healthy cats out there. So please don't contribute to that stereotype that black cats are unlucky in any way. And if you do see one out there, make sure you treat it well and even consider adopting one, because it's so sad to see that all these black cats and the shelters are being put down because people are scared to adopt them. So I just wanted to update you guys on that and let you know, and that's why I haven't got a video up here recently, but I know that Salem would be extremely disappointed in me if I let that affect any of my videos, or just, you know, doing what I usually do, just because I've been so upset about that. So anyways, let's go on with the video. Now, I wanted to take a moment and try something different and thank my Patreon subscribers at the beginning of my video, and I wanted to thank Pam for donating again this month. If you are interested in supporting my channel through Patreon, please check the link in the description box below. And if you don't have any means to support the channel monetarily, please consider sharing my video with friends. That really helps my channel out a lot. Sharing videos, liking, and comment, all that usual stuff really does go a long way and help me out as well. And so today I just wanted to go ahead and show you my Phalaenopsis collection. I have a whole lot of orchids, and I have a whole lot more just of Phalaenopsis. More specifically, the moth orchid, you know, there's a different, I believe the genus Phalaenopsis has anywhere from 60 to 70 different species in it. So there are a lot of different kinds of Phalaenopsis that you'll see, but I'm focusing more on like the moth orchid, the Phalaenopsis amabilis, I believe is how you say it. But they're really great plants to have. They are a tropical kind of species that is native to around Southeast Asia and kind of Micronesia and the islands around there, all the way down to a part in Australia, I want to say around Queensland. But there is a vast kind of area that the Phalaenopsis and orchids are kind of thought to really kind of originate in, and most of that is kind of a tropical area where the trees are pretty much a home to a good amount of orchids, given the name of epiphytes. They grow through the trees, on branches, and their roots are out and exposed to the weather. And they're able to get their moisture from the wind and then any kind of dew in the air and any kind of nutrients in the trees and in the branches and in the wind as well. Yes, they are epiphytes and found in nature. They are growing in the trees and in the crowns. So they are from an area that does get a whole lot of light, but the orchids are underneath the leaves of the trees, so they do get kind of a muted amount of light that kind of filters down through there. So typically your Phalaenopsis orchid, you want it to be kind of like a green olive color. You don't want it to be too dark. If your leaves are really dark green, that is an indication that your Phalaenopsis is not getting the right amount of light. So you may want to go ahead and reconsider the location that you have your Phalaenopsis orchid in. And if you notice that your orchid is not reblooming, you may want to increase the light for your orchid as well. Now, I've noticed a lot of the times when I get my orchids, I don't really go out and buy Phalaenopsis anymore just because they're so readily available that all my friends and my family and my neighbors get them. And then when they don't flower anymore, I get them because they're like, well, I'll just throw it away. No, Justin likes them, so I'll just see if he can get them to reflower again. And I've always been really good with orchids and getting them to reflower. And I will tell you that this guy right here on the side is fake, so don't give me credit for this one right here. But like I was saying, if you don't see them reblooming at all, I would adjust your light. I have a majority of mine under artificial light in the LEDs, so I've noticed that putting them under there and getting them the right amount of light really does help them to start reblooming. And as you can see, some of my orchids here do have some flowers on them, and they are looking pretty good. So that being said, they are the perfect kind of flowering species or angiosperm to keep indoors in our homes. Normally plants don't really kind of fit in our homes just because they're so bone dry. They don't have any kind of humidity. We like higher temperatures of around 70, 80, 90 degrees. A lot of plants like the temperature zone, but they don't kind of like the humidity or lack thereof. But as long as you get like a pebble tray or your spray bottle and you can mist them, or a humidifier, they really do fit in quite nicely with our temperature inside of our homes. Now, that being said, I was mentioning that I do keep mine under the LEDs, so that really helps them with the flowering. But if you don't have artificial lights, what you should do is put them in like an eastern facing window. They do like a lot of morning light, and then protection from the sun during the hottest part of the day. So an eastern facing window is really nice for them. They can go in a south-facing window or a west-facing window if there is a sheer curtain, or if you scoot them back a little bit. The leaves can and will burn quickly, so make sure that you don't have them in direct sunlight for very long, because you will bleach the leaves out, and they will burn and succumb to all that heat intensity in the light. So a lot of people think tropics, they get a lot of sunlight and they need a lot of sunlight. Well, that's just not true, because like I said, they are growing in the crowns of trees, so they don't get a whole lot of direct sunlight anyways. And that's why I have mine under artificial light, because that doesn't really burn them out, and it gives them the kind of muted light that they like for a longer period of time. Now, that being said, they do need dark time, at least 8 hours of darkness for them to flower and everything. So if you do have them under artificial light, make sure you're at least giving them 8 hours of rest every day. So make sure you don't keep the lights on all the time. And if it's at 16 hours, I wouldn't go any more than that. So they do need a dark time to kind of recover and to actually be able to flower. Now, I will say that a lot of mine are the Phalaenopsis amabilis, but I do have my Phalaenopsis Sogovivian up here in the front. The Sogovivian just kind of means that it's been bred with a kind of mini orchid, so that it does stay rather small. A lot of the Sogovivians are variegated, and mine is too. And you can kind of see that he does look a little bit thirsty. I did have him kind of closer to the windowsill and I wasn't really paying attention, and I think it got really kind of hot, and as you can see there's a lot of lines in the leaves and they don't look as full as the rest of them do. So I've been trying to monitor his water intake and try to help him out that way, and I think he's starting to recover nicely, but make sure that you do not forget to water these guys because they are from the tropics and they are from around the rainforest, so they are used to a good amount of humidity and water. I must tell you, you've got to be so careful when you water a Phalaenopsis orchid. Don't give them an ice cube. If you think about it, everyone always thinks tropics when you think of an orchid. Well, I mean, there are orchids that are native here in Kentucky and around Canada, and just about on every continent there are orchids out there. So there are orchids that are used to the cold weather, but ice is never a good mixture for any kind of orchid out there. Now, if you don't believe me, check out Miss Orchid Girl on YouTube. She talks about that whole watering orchids by ice cubes and how ridiculous that is. So watch her. She knows what she's talking about, and she's done a lot of research with that stuff, and she will tell you not to water your orchids with an ice cube. I believe that came into thought just because there's not a whole lot of water in an ice cube, so if you stick one or two on there, that's about the perfect amount of water for an orchid to kind of stay alive and thrive, but all that coldness exposed to the roots and everything is not good. So I never water my orchids with an ice cube. I always, they come in these nice little pots. You do need to be careful though, because they are in plastic here, and plastic will move a little bit, but it will kind of constrict the roots and not let them move around a whole lot. So if you have some movement in here, your orchid is okay, but if it feels like it's about to pop, it's not getting a whole lot of room in there, you're going to end up choking your orchids out with this plastic and then won't be able to breathe or get oxygen. So if you think about it, when they are wrapped around a branch on a tree, they are exposed to the air and everything, and they're getting movement, but down here in the moss or the wood bark chips, they're not going to get a whole lot if they're kind of smothered in there with the plastic and everything. But if you want to water them, I always just leave them in here and then fill up this whole container with water, and then I set a timer for about 15 to 20 minutes to let them kind of sit in that water and soak up as much water as they want to, and then after the timer goes off, I'll take them out, squeeze the plastic just a little bit so that a whole bunch isn't dripping down in there, and then you're sitting it in water. They can sit in water for a little bit, just a couple minutes, like the 20-minute mark, but after that, if you leave them in there too much longer, they will kind of succumb to the root rot and die back, so they don't like to be exposed and sitting in water all day. But like I said, after that 20-minute mark, just take it and dump it out, squeeze out the plastic to make sure that there's not a whole lot of water in there, and you want it to, the moss or the bark chips to kind of feel like a wrung out sponge consistency, where it is a little bit wet, but it's not saturated, because these are not porous, the pots they're in, and any water that's in there, they will hold water in there, and you could end up killing your orchid. And again, if you do get water down in the crown, make sure you take a paper towel and stick the tip or the corner of the paper towel down in the crown of the orchid, because if you get a lot of water in there and you don't get it out, your orchid can and will die to crown rot. I've seen it happen all the time, where the leaves start falling off and they turn yellow and they just kind of go kaput and you don't have anything left, but your Phalaenopsis orchids will die from crown rot. Now, if you have a ceiling fan or a standing fan on them and you get a little bit of water in there, the air will dry it out as long as you have continuous air motion. But if you have a whole lot of water just sitting in there and you leave it, your Phalaenopsis will die from crown rot if you do it all the time. So make sure that you take a paper towel and you stick it down in there to blot out any of the extra water that is just sitting in the crown of your Phalaenopsis, because they will die from that. Now, I want to move on to talking about the flowers. The flowers are really interesting. They are really pretty. A lot of them are dyed, especially if you see the blues, the dark reds. I mean, some of the Phalaenopsis do have red orchid flowers, but a lot of them are dyed if you see like the green and the teals and even some of the kind of whiter yellow parts. But they do take white orchids and get them to kind of soak up some different kind of dye to make the flowers look pretty and more appealing. But when the flowers die and you get them to flower again, they'll probably end up just a regular white flower. They are named after Phalaenopsis, the Phalanea kind of moths. If you look those up, the Phalanea genus of moths, they look like a moth in flight. So that's why they call them the Phalaenopsis Orchid, the moth orchid. That's how they got their common name, because they do kind of resemble a moth in flight. But if you look at it, the flowers consist of about 2 lateral petals here on the sides. And then they have a labellum or a lip down here on the bottom. And then they have 3 flower-like sepals on the back. So these actually aren't flower petals or sepals there. And this kind of column, little hall or whatever you want to call it, inside is the reproductive organs of the orchid. So that is what the flowers look like, but a lot of people will actually say that it is entirely a flower, but there are sepals on here, not really petals. But the reason why they are so popular nowadays is because the flowers can last for several months. Now, I know some orchids, their flowers will last a couple of hours, but the Phalaenopsis can even last maybe even half a year sometimes if they're well taken care of, they're getting ample water and light and nutrients. So if you're wanting your flower to flower all the time, it's going to need a lot of light, a lot of muted light. It's going to need a good amount of water and humidity, and it's going to need a good amount and a steady supply of nutrients so that it can continue to flower all the time. Now, they do need a rest period to where they aren't flowering, so if you're giving it a lot of light, a lot of water, and a good amount of nutrients, and you don't really see any flowers coming up, that's okay. Just give it a little bit of time to rest and recuperate, and before long, they will end up flowering and looking great again. So that being said, you can cut off the kind of spike with the flowers on there. If they start to turn brown and die back, you can cut it off because until it is fully dead, it will continue to drain or siphon off from the plant a bunch of valuable nutrients that the plant will actually need. So if you look at these kind of thick green leathery leaves and their tuberous kind of air roots or aerial roots, they are kind of made for life in the trees, but here in the home, a lot of people keep them packed full of moss, and others keep it kind of packed with bark chips, and even still, I've seen some serious growers use those clay pellets or terracotta pellets that just give the plant a lot of room for water and air to get down in there. But if you do have yours tucked in with a bunch of moss, that is going to affect how much water your plant needs versus if you have them in the terracotta balls or if you have them in wood bark. Now, if you have them in wood bark, that holds on to less water than the moss does. And I believe the terracotta balls hold on to even less water still. So if you do have yours in bark nuggets or your orchid kind of bark, sphagnum moss mixture, then you're going to be watering your plant a little bit more than if you were to have them in moss. So about once a week, maybe a little bit more in the summertime should suffice. And then if with the moss, I always water it when about the top of the moss feels completely dry. And again, I just fill it up with water and then let it sit in there for about 20 minutes or so and then drain it out. Now, as I was saying earlier, a lot of people like the orchids because of the flowers. And the flowers do last a long time on some species. And a lot of them, when they're mature, they'll grow upside down because they get so heavy and gravity always wins. And then after some are pollinated, the flowers do turn green. So depending on what species you have, you may experience some greenness or flowers just last forever or seem to last forever. And it's funny too because they can stay open for several months at a time. And you'll go back several months later and be like, dang, is he okay? Well, I guess he is. And this one looks like he's flowered for a while. He's got 2 flower spikes on him. and I think I wired him up just right. I can't really tell. You got to be sure not to kind of wire them too tight to where water or nutrients won't kind of actually go up through the stem to actually keep the flowers healthy. But you don't want to do it too loosely or it'll just kind of sag down, and they, as you can tell, aren't meant to stand up. They need something to train themselves up on and to keep their flowers up and erect. Otherwise, the gravity will always win. The flowers will actually grow down. Now, I know that there is a species out there, and they sell them at Kroger's, and it's like the Phalaenopsis Waterfall, where a whole bunch of blooms just come in, and they kind of cascade down sort of like a waterfall. And that's why a lot of people like the Phalaenopsis Orchid, is because they can be kind of preserved as a cut flower for like weddings or dances. But they are very versatile, and they can last for a long time as a cut flower. And they last even longer still on the actual plant. So they are great plants to have. But, like I said, don't give up on them just because they have lost their flowers. If you're able to have a little patience, they will bloom again as long as you're meeting the right requirements for that. So I know a lot of people after Christmas, they'll throw out their poinsettias or their Christmas cactus or their holiday cactus or whatever, but a lot of people do that with the orchids even still. They will throw them out just because they no longer have flowers on them. And as I was talking about earlier, they are considered a low light orchid. A lot of people will think tropics and think that they need to be in the light all the time, but remember, it has to be muted. It can't be direct sunlight because the leaves will burn. Now, when I talk about fertilizer, I get my fertilizer from a guy I know off eBay that sends it to me in bulk sizes. But any kind of orchid fertilizer that's out there that's reputable, that's a balanced orchid fertilizer, like a 20-20-20, really will help. A lot of people will fertilize theirs once a week, but if you fertilize it once a week, make sure you dilute it by at least by half, maybe even by 3/4, because if you're feeding the orchids that much every week, you're going to end up causing a lot of toxic fertilizer salts to build up in the media, and then you'll choke your plant out and you'll kill your plant. So too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. Too much food in that situation will end up causing your plant to kind of choke back and not be able to do anything with it. And if you do suspect that you do have kind of a fertilizer salt toxicity level in your plant's media, you need to use really clear, maybe even distilled water to kind of flush it out over time. And all you need to do to leach it out is to run a bunch of clear, I use distilled water, through the media and do it for a while. I mean, you're going to have to do it over time, but just let it run through the plastic part and drain out freely, and it'll flush all the toxic salts that are in there out. Now, as I was saying, they really do love their humidity. So they do like humidity at around about 50% or even higher. So you may want to get either a pebble tray, depending on how many you have, or a spray bottle, or even still, if you have a couple like I do, you're going to need a humidifier because they really do like humidity in the air. And as you know, our houses, especially in the wintertime, are really bone dry. So make sure that you are keeping an eye on your humidity. You can go to Lowe's or Myers or Home Depot and purchase a temperature and a humidity monitor for around $8 to $12, and you just set it in your house. You don't have to hook it up or anything, and it'll tell you what your temperature of your house is and what the humidity levels in your house are. Right now I can see mine's at about 49% humidity. I like mine to be around 50, 55, up to 60% based on all my bonsais and my orchids. Now, as you know, this is just my Phalaenopsis collection. So I do have Vandas, Oncidiums, Cattleyas. I got them all. I probably do have a problem. But that's okay. These orchids are not blinking, so I know that they're not being held against their will, and they are flowering, so they are pretty happy. So you don't have to report me. My fiance knows about all this, and I think we are happy. Just as long as I have my plants, I'm good to go. Now, as I was saying, I wanted to talk a little bit about the media. I was telling you that some people do have a lot of moss in there with theirs, but A viewer of mine actually contacted me a couple weeks ago and had a kind of block of sponge. She had bought hers and got it out of the pot, and inside there was just, what is it called? It's like planter's foam that they use to kind of stick down in there and stick flowers in, and all the flowers will hold up straight and everything. But if you have that in there, you can actually try to remove it, but a lot of times it'll be hard to, because the roots will grow through it, and you may end up cutting the roots off. But that stuff will break down over time as long as you water it. It will eventually break down over time, but you can just put it in a pot and put some maybe sphagnum moss around there and some orchid bark chips in there to kind of help it out, or even your terracotta balls, for lack of a better word, or even some moss down in there. So if you do have that kind of florist foam is what it's called, it can be right at home in there, so don't freak out and think that you have to get it out or it's styrofoam or anything like that and it's going to kill your plant. It will hold on to a good amount of water, so you just need to watch the amount of water that you give that plant, because you may end up overwatering the plant and not even knowing it. So just make sure that whenever you do go out and you do get one, that you do kind of pay attention to what it is planted in, and that you know how to best deal with that. Because as I said earlier, the bark chips will not hold a whole lot of water, and the moss will hold some, but it does not drain as quickly as the bark chips do. So if you do have bark chips, you're going to be watering a little bit more than if you do have the moss. There are some pests out there for orchids, so you do have to be a little bit careful when you're out shopping and you want to buy one. Just kind of give your orchid over a little quick glance. If you have your cell phone on you, use the flashlight on there and kind of look it over to make sure you don't see anything crawling around. Examine the roots. You do kind of want to see our little root tip. I don't think you can see it on here, but you can tell with the roots, if they are pretty white, they haven't been watered in a while. If they are just about as green as the leaves are, they've probably been watered here recently. And if you see a lot of tan or brownish colored on the roots are dying. So if you look in there and you see a bunch of brown and a bunch of cracked roots, it probably hasn't been watered relatively soon, and it's probably dying. So as I said, a lot of these plants are rescues from me, because friends and neighbors and family members will get them and then not know what they're doing, so they give them to me. But if you get one, try not to throw it out just because it's lost its blooms. They will flower again, and they are really cool, fun plants to take care of. And it's always interesting to see another one rebloom, because you can go out there and buy them from the stores where the growers and the farmers and everybody knew what they were doing. But when you get one to rebloom, it is a kind of special feeling to see that happen. Well, guys, that's really all I wanted to say on my life's problems right now and the Phalaenopsis collection that I do have. I will be replanting some of these in an upcoming video, but until then, make sure you leave a comment and let me know what your favorite kind of orchid is. If you know me, you know my favorite orchid is a Vanda orchid, and I will be doing my Vanda collection sometime in the near future. But until then, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the bell next to it. That way you'll know anytime I've uploaded a new video. You guys take it easy, have a good one, and don't forget, always plant prudently. Thank you, YouTube.